Welcome to the Jackson Post podcast, Behind the Paywall, episode 3. As Brandon mentioned last week, it doesn't matter if I give the time and the date because nobody listens live anyway. So when you're listening to this, it's going to be after we record. Nevertheless, I like to do it. The fourth what?
Yeah, it's also the episode 4, isn't it?
Oh, it is episode 4. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay. And see, off to a bad start already. Saturday night, though, recording a night early. Lot to get to. Brandon, listen, I highlighted stuff. Hold on, here it is. Like I highlighted, I sat on my front porch. I was like making sure there were quotes I wanted to get to. And this is from the post from the week of, this was printed on Thursday, April the 10th. So it would have been from April the 6th through today, right? Like that, the news of last week. And we're going to take a peek behind the paywall, give you some context around some of these stories, have discussions around them. And hopefully, if you have questions, just kind of fill in some gaps of what happened in Jackson over the last week. And I want to start, it's not bad news, but it's just something I don't know how I want to get into it. And it's the headline, Business Owner Questions JPD Policies. And I want to start with a broader conversation because we were kind of talking a couple weeks ago, and I was like, but this was before this was published, but it was on social media, and I was like, how is this particular story a news story? And you started to get into it, but then we waited. And so we're going to kind of open this up right now. But to give some background, Brad Greer, who is a regular citizen, but also, as you mentioned in the article, president or former president of the Atlanta Neighborhood Association, also chairman of the local Republican Party, took to social media to complain about the way the police officer handled something at Campbell Lake, and then went on to complain about the system of policing in Jackson, naming Chief Corley and Mayor Conger. You know, when this originally happened, people sent me screenshots. I'm not on social media that much, and so I don't know if I would have seen it anyway. People were sending me screenshots of this when it happened. And I was like, kind of laughing, like, okay, because people do this. I've done it on social media. I've complained about something, and like that's what people do. And then I brought it up to you, and you kind of intimated that this is going to be a story. And I'm like, wait, how is this going to be a story? So here we are. Brandon, I'll just let you answer. Why in the world is this a news story? Why did this make the front page?
Yeah. All right. So there's at least 2 different ways to look at this, at how this became a story. First off, there's about 6 different things that make a news story newsworthy that you learn in journalism school. And I'll be honest with you, even though I'm in it every day and I live it, I've been out of college for 20 years now. So I'm inside the forest, so I can't see it because I'm surrounded by the trees. So I may not be able to name them all off, but it's like people that are important, people that are popular, anything out of the ordinary, any kind of problem that just needs to be addressed, stuff like that. That's the stuff that makes a story worthy of a news outlet putting in some effort more than just a copy and paste of a press release to cover it. And so, yeah, I mean, this first happened. And I was like, okay, is this news? And there are some news stories that I do that go in the post and on jacksonpost.news simply because, wow, a lot of people care about this. And Brad's initial post got, I know, more than 100 shares. I think when I went on the radio the other day with our good friend Chuck, and Brad was on there, and your favorite city councilman, JP Stovall.
Okay, keep going. I like JP.
I think Chuck had said that it had been shared last time he saw like 130 times or something like that, which is that viral in the terms of the entire internet and the entire Facebook universe? No. But when we're talking about Jackson viral, I'd classify that as Jackson viral. So we got people that care about it.
Were these shares making fun of him? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just wondering if are people sharing this because they're really concerned about these issues that he says that there are, or were they saying this dude's at it again? Look at this. This is
That's a good question. And I mean, I'm sure there were. If there's exactly 130, maybe exactly half would be 65. Maybe there were 66 or more that were making fun. Okay, if it's 66, and that means that there were 64 that weren't, and maybe I'd agree with him. Even if that's 64, that's still that's still getting on my radar a little bit. I may not necessarily write just about that, but I'm watching it and I'm aware of it. Second of all, you mentioned kind of his resume, and I kind of lay out a big chunk of his resume in the first two or three graphs of the story, just to kind of go ahead and lay that foundation at the beginning of the story. Like, hey, this guy, he's not an elected official by the public, but he does represent a couple of different segments of people that are pretty relevant to Jackson Police and City Hall. I know you're not a big fan of the Atlanta board or association or whatever, but
I think they're changing over. They're they're changing the guard a little bit. I might be
yeah.
back on board.
But his past with them um, shows that there is a history that that he at one time was in charge of representing a significant portion of the residential population of Jackson. Other notable people who have been kind of in that position include current city councilman Frank McMean, former city councilman Ross Pretty, and also former city councilman / current mayor Scott Conger himself. So he's got that on his resume. Not to say that real estate people are more important than other industries around here, but real estate is kind of important around here right now. Just with
Just
the house.
ask, just
What's
ask
that?
Tony Niehoff. I said, just ask Tony Niehoff.
Yes, exactly. Tony Niehoff. If y'all aren't aware, he's a county commissioner and he's a realtor. And a Kentucky fan, and he's got kids. Sorry, Tony.
Sorry, Tony. Who do we take out? JP and Tony already just like getting hit by collateral damage. Like they had nothing to do with this, but man, they are just such easy targets that you can't help it. It's just there. So you got to take it when you get it. Keep going.
But they're both big fans of Brad, so it's fine.
As am I.
Right. Plus, yeah, so he's president of the Real Estate Association of West Tennessee or Middle West Tennessee, something like that. And the Republican Party one. Republican Party's kind of important around here. And obviously him kind of being at the helm of that ship is kind of puts him important. So we've got that. He is a business owner, and his main business, I'd like to think that you or I could throw a Nerf football from Scott Conger's office. I think you'd have a better shot at hitting Brad Greer's front door than I would, or at least throwing the distance. I don't know if either of us have the aim to hit the door, but you know, he's not that far away from City Hall. I mean, does that mean every business owner near City Hall is important? Well, they are important. Does this make him more important than somebody in North Jackson? No, but when we get into the content of the story, all right, now here's the part that I haven't said anything to you about, and I think you'll understand me once I give you this one. There is a definite percentage of the population of Jackson that, whether it's accurate or not, they are nervous, fearful, concerned about the crime situation in Jackson. Are they overblowing the number of shootings and murders and homicides that go on in Jackson? Maybe. But the fact that, I mean, I think the number that I put in the paper a couple of months ago was 18 homicides in Jackson in 2024. I mean, if I'm living in Jackson in the middle of it, I'm probably a little nervous to get outside certain times of day or whatever. And this isn't the first interview I've done for this type of story, but this is the first time I've done an interview for this type of story. And the person who was interviewed was willing to put their name on the quotes and was willing to be known to be a part of the story, questioning and complaining about the policing of Jackson. Now, let's back up a second. At the end of the story, there's a comment from Brad. He's not criticizing the officers themselves. He's just criticizing the leadership and the policies that the officers are doing. So
I'm glad I used my highlighter because I do feel like he criticized the officer, and that's something that surprised me.
In the one specific instance that we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
And here's the thing, and I don't want to opine a lot, but I believe that I always, right or wrong, and I know I'll get pushback on this because I know the jobs aren't the same, but I do think they have a lot in common. I think a police officer and teacher often find themselves underneath the bureaucracy of whatever system is above them and having to do really, really hard and challenging work, and they end up becoming sort of a target for whatever side of an issue the right or left want to play. When the issue is the systems, it's not I mean, obviously it is the people in some cases, but it's the systems with which those people work that
Right.
are broken, but they become the, so I think like anybody that obviously if a police officer unjustly murders somebody, then they have to be held accountable for that. It's taking away those. And I think that for far too long, they weren't held accountable for that. And I think that's where a lot of the distrust in that system comes from. But even public education, who's been under attack by the right for the last several years, that system is, I mean, I could argue, even as a public educator, I could argue that the public school system, not this one in particular, but just overall, is broken. Like we've got to fix it. um, and I think there are probably some police officers that would also say the criminal justice system is kind of broke. Like we've got to be able to fix this a little bit. So I was surprised that he was as critical of the officer as he was.
And his action. Yeah, yeah, okay, I get what you're saying now.
And I think that's
He was
it.
critical.
Say it again.
There's two instances that's discussed that are discussed during the story that you could say he's being critical of a specific officer.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same one in both instances, but the one who handled the complaint of the three on the steps of a church, and then the one from a couple of weeks ago on the Facebook Live.
And
Yeah.
and I think there's something to this as well, because all of these instances that he referenced in this article, I've already heard about, right? Like that, like we knew about the video from the summer because I was brought up with the homeless thing. Like these are, and it's like, and I know you said he's the only one willing to put his name on it, but whenever I read this, it just felt like, oh, here we go again. Except for some reason, it's in the paper this time. And I think also maybe what, and I just learned this recently, like a year ago from my editor at Lookout. I wrote a really nice piece on the All Saints immigration program, and she was like, for an article, like it would have been really good if you would have got something from the other side of people who didn't like it, because then it just, it wouldn't have read like an opinion piece. This, to me, sometimes this read like a Brad Greer opinion, like he was just able to like pontificate what he wanted. Because I was sitting here thinking, like, he gave all of these instances, right, of when the police department wasn't doing their job.
Right.
If you were to interview me, I can give you 4 instances just in the last year or year and a half where I've called the police. They've responded exactly the right way in exactly the time and manner. They followed up on investigations, and I could list all of those instances out. It would just be completely different than what he was complaining about. You know what I mean? So I think that's where I was like, what do other downtown business owners say? Or like, are they willing to talk about, hey, yeah, we have great police presence here and they're fine. I think for me, it was just like, and some of the stuff, I just want to read this and then we can move on. Mr. Greer said that he works downtown across the street from county courthouse and a few dozen yards from city hall, like you mentioned. So I'm here in the middle of it every day. I know what's going on, and people talk to me and they tell me what's going on because I'm apparently the only one willing to stand up and say something, which you referenced. I own my own business. I don't have a boss other than my creator and my wife. So the only thing I might need to watch out for is if our police chief or mayor decide to target me because I decided to speak up. All right, is that like, do you feel like that's a legitimate thing? Like they didn't even want to respond to this article. Nobody, like, they're not targeting him. They want him to go away.
So they didn't respond to my questions for
Okay.
the article, but they did respond to his initial post with a post of their own. I guess not really in their defense, but kind of in the vein of what you were just talking about a couple of minutes ago. After the story published, and I went back and read it, and I read it like 4 times before it posted. I went back and I was like, I should have done a better job of putting some information from their side that they actually posted into the story. And I didn't. I just kind of left it at up. We asked them and they didn't comment. So I'll take an L on that one for that one. But it's as far as as far as your question, I asked them. I said, how could they target you? And it was a legitimate question on my part because I don't want to do this interview, run with this story, publish it have the results that I expect of a unhappy police chief and a mayor. And then worst case scenario, they do actually target him with whatever they could. I mean, I don't think they're going to throw him in jail for not being nice.
Maybe they'll just write an op-ed about him in the paper.
They could do that.
Generally, that's how some elected officials choose to respond to things that are in the paper. They don't target them. They just write their own op-eds.
They do that. I did have a supporter of Congress say Well, so maybe Conger needs to send you an opinion piece of his own talking about how Brad Greer could be a better citizen than what he is. I said, well, I'm pretty sure after this edition of the Post where I've got Brad Greer running him down as a leader, and then on page 2 I had Gary Deaton going back 8 years and talking about how $12 million a year from the county. Scott Conger probably is not going to send that op-ed to the Post. And they were like, the person I said that to said, well, there's no other paper that's being read around here. So where's he going to send it to if he wants it read?
Facebook Live, Kenny Cummings podcast.
There we
He's
go.
going. But you brought it up because I wasn't going to bring it up, but also I noticed the Deaton column, which is really like it does provide context, like you mentioned, but it is like all of a sudden it's like, Commissioner Deaton's now he's got the floor and he can, go back and get some stuff. Either way, so here's what about both of these. Go ahead.
That's why that story ran, but go ahead.
Yeah, for the context. But like both of these can be put to bed now. Like the money one was put to bed years ago, I know he needed to get that right.
And it's part of the Pope extending the deal as part of the Pope deal, so that's why it's getting brought up again. So, but yeah, keep going. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But then this thing with with the Campbell Lake and the police thing, like I honestly wonder because I did kind of like I was on Facebook today and I saw some stuff that was getting shared around, and I wonder if he would have made that post again if he had the choice. I wonder if the mayor and the police department would have responded to the initial post again if they had that to do over again. I don't know. You know what I love about the story though? Like it is like some of these quotes were really silly. I know you didn't write them, like they were quotes, but they were so melodramatic. What I love about the story though is this is about as local as you can get. Like there is no like this is the most local story that we can have in the Post. Right? Like, I mean, Campbell Lake, a neighbor looking out the window, complaining. Like this is the most local story. Like you're not getting this anywhere else.
So can I be devil's advocate here for a second? All right. On the road that I'm not going to give your address here, but you live in Jackson within the grand scheme of things, not far from where Brad lives. If you came home one day and you saw a car with a partially open door and the guy slumped over in the driver's seat, would you handle it the same way or would you just totally...
I'll tell you how I've handled it. So to answer your question. So I have one day a man who was completely inebriated wandered up on my porch and sat down in my swing. I was on a phone call with my daughter. She lived in Texas at the time, so we had these daily phone calls. So I kind of like kept my eye on him while I was talking to her. And then when I hung up, I went out there to check on him, got him some water, and I called Barry Cooper, actually, who's the first person I called because he was, I guess, over Jacoa. And so I just explained the situation, told him who the name was because the guy had told me that he had just left. And so I called Barry and then Barry took it from there. So and then I've had other situations where people have come up to me. I've taken them places where they needed to go. And I'm not saying that that's how other people would handle it. I just don't call. I've called the police lately for a couple things. My daughter's car got broken into. I called the police. I called because that's just what I have to do for insurance purposes and everything like that. I see people walking down my street all the time. I see people sitting in cars in my street. I generally don't call the police. That's just not, I think, Brad and I live in the same neighborhood, but I think we probably see the world in very different ways. And so, I think it's probably he's on one extreme and I'm on the other, and probably the best decision making is somewhere in the middle, like it usually is with everything. So that to answer your question, that's how I've always handled things. I don't know. It takes a lot for me to call the police for a situation.
I understand.
Yeah, and I will say this: when they have dispatch 911, and they have never not been good when I've done it. Whenever I've contacted them, like quick, efficient. Like I don't know, I've never had a bad experience with them, and I'm not just saying that to be a foil to Brad. Like I'm really not. That's just the truth from my perspective. All right. Anyway, speaking of my dealings with the police, last week I was out in the storm. We talked about it last week. We don't have to rehash it. They had great response time, but the storm really messed some stuff up. Obviously, front page, you have a great picture there. And then Union, the building around the gymnasium, right? That there was something with the drainage system. Do you know exactly what the situation was over there at the building that caused it to buckle?
So a microburst, essentially what they theorize happened is a microburst. which is like a sudden downward force of wind during a stormy time. I mean, 'cause some people thought it was an actual like a EF0 tornado, just kind of hopped down for a second and then hopped back up. That was just some stuff I saw that night, people theorizing. But the next day's people who are a lot smarter about this than you or me looked at it and said, "Yeah, it looks like this is what happened." So the a wall, the roof was caved in at first, and then one of the outside walls was starting to lean in, and then eventually early the next morning, I think this was Thursday night of when all the storms were coming in. And then Friday morning, they just went ahead and knocked the wall down just for safety purposes. Let's just go ahead and get it knocked down because it's going to come down anyways, and then we'll deal with whatever happens after that. We'll prepare for that. But yeah, it did affect. One, water was collecting on the roof, but it did affect like the plumbing areas. I think either way, a lot of water got into it, and it wasn't at Fred DeLay Gymnasium or the auxiliary gym. It was at the place that used to be like the fitness center for the school. Fortunately for them, that had been moved to the area right next to Fred DeLay down the hallway, and they hadn't put anything else in that room yet. So that's where the wall that buckled, that's where the roof that was buckling, that's where that was. Now, all the water that came in started working its way out, and it did get into Fred DeLay. It did get into the auxiliary gym. It did get into some of the athletic department offices and some of the education. I can't remember what all departments are close to that area. It got into that. I know art was close to it. In fact, a family friend of ours whose daughter goes to school there, she's an art student. In fact, I haven't heard from my wife if she was able to go in and get some pieces that she wasn't sure she could go back and get in yet because they wouldn't let her into the room. So they had some galleries planned to kind of show off for some donors coming up like that weekend. So some of that was affected, but I think pretty much everything is probably fixable by the end of the semester. Worst case scenario, they're not back in their offices or the classroom by the end of the semester, and they'll be back in August easy. If there's any summer term, they might be back for summer term.
When I first saw those pictures, I guess they were circulating. It looked really bad, like the way that building was buckled, and without really knowing what was happening, I didn't know if it was just water had saturated it so much that it buckled, which is kind of silly to think about. But
Yeah.
Union, man. I mean, obviously this isn't 2008 all over again. But man, their luck with weather is not it's not good.
Talking with Tim Ellsworth, who is the media information chief information officer, whatever union calls his position, the one who babysits the media union. He, when talking to him that day and talking to a couple others who were there in '08, they said, yeah, we were having PTSD flashbacks to 2008 dealing with this. But I mean, just like in 2008, I wrote a story back in February on the anniversary of that tornado. She's now a teacher at South Gibson County, but she was a junior at Union living on campus. And her story was also similar to this one, where it's like, okay, this bad thing happened, but we're all safe, we're all good. Let's look at things could have been worse, but God kept it from being worse. So we're going to gather as soon as we can, and we're going to worship, and we're going to thank God for being good to us, because things could have been a whole lot worse. Thank you, God, for not making it worse. They did that in '08. They did it again on the morning of April 4th or whatever that morning was.
In '08, was married at the time, and my ex-wife knew a student, their family friends. The student was from Honduras, and she was a freshman, and she was in the dorm. And I think my ex-wife was working a night shift, so I had to go over to Union to try to find this this poor girl. And they've been displaced. I mean, it was the night up, like literally after it happened. And I mean, I couldn't obviously get on the campus, but they had moved everybody over to where I guess what's the new sporting goods store over there? Not Dick's, but the one that
Academy.
Academy. So right, it was over there in that parking lot. Of course, Academy wasn't there then, but it's like a staging area, and it was just not pandemonium. I mean, people were obviously freaking out, but I mean, it wasn't crazy, but they were just hordes of people just kind of standing around in the rain. And so it was, I'm sure they were having PTSD because I cannot imagine just, another storm like that coming through again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. They compared to that, like they came out of this relatively unscathed. At the very bottom of the front page, this is about another private school that I have some association with, University School of Jackson. I attended Union, and then I went to work at USJ right out of college for my first 5 years. And they announced a new upper school leadership. So I want you to talk a little bit about Shane Jacobs taking over as upper school director. And we talked before we started recording, and I've noticed like there seems to be a trend at USJ of getting like local public school people from around the area and bringing them into the school. So you know Shane better than I do, I assume. So what is he going to bring to this position?
He's going to bring some quality leadership to USJ. Not that they didn't already have quality leadership. I like David Suber. He's good people. I enjoyed hanging out with him on the sidelines on Friday nights during football season because usually when I'd walk up, particularly if I'd gone to another game first and then I came to USJ in like the middle of the second quarter, he and the headmaster, Don Rowe, were usually standing on the end of USJ sideline closest to the entrance. So I just got to go and hang out with them for most of the time that I'd be there. And that was always fun and sometimes informational. But so Shane Jacobs, he took over the Peabody coaching staff or became the head coach in May of 2015. He was the defensive coordinator for a couple years before, may have been 16, but either way, he was the defensive coordinator the year they won state, the first year they won state in 2014. And then he's the head coach for their next 3 state championship. He was a head coach and navigated, was it a 44 game win streak they had? I mean, it would have been longer, but the second state championship they won, they finished 14-1 with a loss to, of all teams, Gibson County. Now, Gibson County had a better team than usual that year, but usually Gibson County was like, why are they even playing them? I think they were in the same region that year or something. But it was just a perfect storm that night, or else we'd be talking about like a 50-game win streak that they have. But while he is leading one of the premier football programs in rural West Tennessee, he also went and got his master's. I forget what his master's is in, but whatever it is, he got it.
Sure, it's administration or something, right?
Yeah,
Like it's got to be.
Or whatever. And he just brings a lot to the table as far as experience, knowledge, know-how, leadership.
Buddy, can I interrupt you real quick? Just not to like scoop your own story that you wrote, but it says he has a doctorate in education. So
there we go.
Get it right.
Yeah,
it's in print.
You also see that story didn't have my byline on it, so
I did notice that. I'm going to ask you off air what that means in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't mind saying it here on air. That usually staff reports means that I rewrote, or if I really trust who sent it, copied and pasted a press release. And
okay, good. I thought it was ChatGPT, and I was about to slam this computer down. Okay.
No.
Thank you, because we can tell when it's in. We can.
None of them have ever been named.
I'm not a good enough writer for AI. Like they're gonna.
But anyways, he just brings a lot of all the intangibles that you want out of a leader. Plus, if you read if you look at my friends at the Mile and Mirror Exchange, the story that Michael Odom did about Jacob's resignation, he gave you a quote in that paper where he talked about one Sunday afternoon last year. He said Sunday afternoons during football season, usually the football staff coaches are together going over film, making a game plan for the opponent on Friday night. Well, his kids are older now, and they're going in different directions playing sports. So his daughter was playing in Nashville, or had something going on in Nashville, and his wife, former Union player Meredith Richardson, now
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right.
She's with her in Nashville. So Shane is at the sportsplex with his son playing baseball, and the whole time he's with his son at baseball, he's thinking about football and how he hates not being able to be there, and how he hates asking his coaching staff to do all that work without him there to help. And then when he finally did get there, he felt bad for not being with his son and for thinking about football the whole time he's with his son. So he's like, something's got to give. And for years, I know I don't look like I work out, and lately I haven't that much, but there's a small gym here in Medina. And maybe 5 years ago, before the pandemic, I go up every morning. I go up there. You know who else was up there? Shane Jacobs and Don Rowe working out together. Apparently, they're good friends. So Don Rowe hiring Shane Jacobs for any position at USJ is not a surprise to me.
And he'll be good. And I feel like everybody they brought in from around here has done really well. As an addendum in this article, Jimmy Glosson was promoted to academic dean, I believe is the correct title. And just like a personal note, I worked with Jimmy at USJ like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter had him for a teacher. And I'll just say this, like whenever I saw this, I'm not surprised. He is an incredible educator. He is as passionate about teaching as every teacher should be, and he pushes kids in a way that is healthy but also not easy. Like he has high expectations, and he really pushes them to do well. And yeah, this is well deserved, and I think USJ is going to be better off with him in this role than they were before. Not that they were bad; they were great. I mean, it's a great school. He's a good match for this role.
Yeah.
All right, man, we're working through it. I don't really want to get back into the Gary Deaton thing. I had that marked, but we put that to bed. It's it's years old anyway, and we got it all sorted out and everything moving through. So I want to end on a happy note.
I
All right,
didn't get any Republicans this week, so apparently it was okay.
you did what?
I didn't get any text messages from any Republicans.
Of course not. You gave them the whole paper. They always send you thank you texts. All right. So Caleb Williams committed to Three Rivers, and when I first heard that, I thought he was going to Pittsburgh, but it's in Missouri, right?
Yeah.
So he's going to Three Rivers in Missouri, but and that's awesome. But then, there was another part to this story that you did that was a really good story. You want to talk a little bit about that, like his younger sibling and that bond, and how that is more than likely going to progress as he goes off to college.
Yeah. So, well, first off, I just want to say I have, in addition to, when I got here in '08, I got here for the tail end of Dexter Williams' coaching tenure at Liberty. I wasn't here to watch him win any state championships, but I think I was there for his last game at Liberty when they went to White Station for a sectional game, and White Station won, and they had the kid that went to play for Memphis, Joe Jackson. Bruce Pearl was there watching when he was still at Tennessee, and Dexter may have coached one more year after that, but but that may have been his last game coaching Liberty. Anyways, Dexter gets in administration, and at the time at Jackson-Madison County Schools, either Nancy Zambito or Verna Ruffin was the superintendent. There was a rule, if you're in administration, you can't coach, so he had to give up coaching. So he got into administration, went to Milan, coached for a minute, and was in administration there, then went home to where he's from, which is West Carroll, and became the superintendent of schools there. And I may be wrong. Surely I'm wrong, because this doesn't seem like something that would actually happen. But I want to say there may have been one year where they had a basketball coach resign real late in the offseason, and he just kind of interim coached the basketball team that one year while being superintendent. I could be, my apologies if I just totally dreamed that up, but I think that might have happened. Either way, he was in administration. And 4 years ago, when Ken Northcutt left Trinity Christian, he was their boys basketball coach and their athletic director. A couple weeks later, Dexter is announced as the new person for both of those roles. And it turns out that not only was he coming to coach the boys basketball team, but his son Caleb, who had been a star basketball player at Medina Middle School, now South Gibson County Middle School, was going to be coming with him. And he and Braden Waller together put their names all over the TCA basketball record book and had a quality career there. Never made it to the state tournament. I think 2 or 3 times they made it to the state quarterfinals, but could never get past that. But something that some people know, but not everybody knows, is that also during these 4 years, there's been a special cheerleader on the TCA cheerleading squad that is actually a student at South Gibson County High School. And it's Caleb's little sister, or Dexter's youngest child, Carson, who is one of the better known representatives of the Down syndrome community around Jackson, and just a great kid to know. She was the first time I met her. Dexter dropped her off for Sunday school in mine and my wife's Sunday school class. I think she was in kindergarten at the time, and she hadn't she hadn't been in there every Sunday, but she's been a part of the my Sunday school class group off and on that whole time. And so now every time she sees me, what are you doing here? I'm here working. Why are you here? Well, I'm in my cheerleading uniform. What do you think? She is she's definitely Dexter's child, and if you know her mother, Amber, who is the director of the special ed program, I think she's the director. She's definitely involved in the special ed program there at South Gibson High. She's definitely her parents' daughter with the spunk and the sass. Great young girl, and watching her on Monday during the signing ceremony, and how much, I mean, she's always had pride in her dad. Like I'll kid her, you know, one Sunday she came in and the previous Tuesday, South Gibson had played TCA. And most of the time TCA wins that game, but it happened to be that year South Gibson was good and they won that week. And I was like, so are you a South Gibson person this week or are you TCA? She's like, I'm TCA. Like, you lost this week. She was like, we're still better.
Yeah, I knew Dexter and I went to Union together. I think he was a year or two older, and then we've known each other throughout basketball. You know,
Did
when I
you ever
officiated,
Liberty basketball?
I was still coaching at that time. So
Okay.
I never officiated a game that he coached. Now I officiated some of Caleb's games in middle school, and I
Okay.
knew like, okay, this like he's good. Like I mean, as a middle schooler, you knew he could play. And then when I heard that Dexter was going to Trinity, I was like, he's gonna take that program to like a really top notch level. I mean, he does that everywhere he goes. And I met Amber. I guess she probably remember this. This was like over 10 years ago. I was lifeguarding at Gold's Gym and they would come out there like almost every day. And so quality people. And you know, if their daughter is like them, then she's going to be fine.
Oh yeah.
It's funny because like with seniors get ready to go to college, I'm experiencing this as a parent, but my daughter is an only child. Was there a sense in that story that like, you know, the siblings are going to be sad to see him, like, you know, because I'm sure that's a big part of a routine, like basketball, like it's been their whole lives. Like, was there any kind of sense of that, like this dynamic is changing with him leaving, or is everybody just still pretty much in the moment?
For the most part, I mean, they're in the moment, but you could also tell they've kind of already been looking ahead.
Mm-hmm.
The story didn't get into, and I haven't written anything, and I haven't said anything publicly, and I don't want to get into any speculation. But with Caleb graduating, I've had some people ask me about if there's going to be and if Dexter is leaving as well, and I mean, I have no reason other than that. I have no reason to think he would at this point. There's been no indication that he is. Now, for all I know, he could announce on Monday, "Hey, y'all, deuces, I'm out." But there's been no indication of that. You go back and kind of go over some of the stuff that he said, and he talked about he plans on being at a lot of home games in Poplar Bluff this year, this coming season. I still hadn't heard anything from him that would suggest, hey, I'm thinking about stepping down or thinking about getting out of coaching or whatever. I mean, he can. I mean, a lot of times colleges are playing on Thursday and Saturday, so he can say, hey, on Thursday mornings we're going to practice because as soon as school's out, I'm headed to Missouri to watch Caleb play, and Saturdays as well. So it could happen. He may have to miss some games, but it's seeable.
You
But
know, it's
yeah,
fun. You mentioned sort of the same, not a similar situation with Jacobs, but as his kids got older, coaching became more challenging. And you think that kids, when they're young, take up more of your time, and it's weird. As I have a senior now who's getting ready to leave, you kind of like find yourself, even though they're not as like under your feet and all around, but you're very much aware of, oh, this is about to be done. And anything else you're putting all that focus into doesn't seem as important as it did. So I'm sure it's going to be that's going to be a challenge for Dexter to balance that, you know, because you want to see your kid play no matter how old they are.
you're right.
Speaking of, I don't want to scoop anything, but obviously you saw it. I'm sure you're going to write about this. Speaking of deuces, I'm out. Tony Shoots, 38 years. retiring. I saw him today. I worked with Tony for 5 years. Kept in touch with him since we knew each other at USJ. And what an incredible basketball coach in West Tennessee. Man, he did some great things and had led some really, really talented teams over the years. So we can get into all that next week, I'm sure. Because I'm sure you're going to be writing about it. You're going to interview him, or have you reached out to him?
Actually, the story is already up on JacksonSun.post and on the Book of the Faces as of this morning. And I'll probably write a column to go along with it, but I don't know what all I could add to what he said because he's essentially stepping down. Speaking of family, he's stepping down because his wife has a autoimmune disorder that's kind of taking its toll on her. And as it takes its toll on her, it's making her less and less mobile. And so he's taking care of her. And plus, their son is 11 now, and he's about to get into middle school sports. So he's taking care of him. So you're taking care of the 11-year-old, you're taking care of the wife. Not a lot of bandwidth left there to do what he felt would be a quality job running a high school basketball program. But yeah, we can get into more of that next week. Definitely he went into the Hall of Fame Thursday night here in Jackson, Madison County with 640 wins, 660 wins, something like that. So definitely a quality career, 38 years coaching basketball, 4 years middle school, 34 at the high school level, 30 of those at USJ. And USJ was one of the better programs and obviously still is. But they were always competitive with him coaching. And so quality job for him. Congratulations to him. A great program, great career, Hall of Fame. Go be with your family and make memories with them.
For sure. All right, buddy. We made it through our 4th episode, right at 52 minutes. And I do want to say, I will, and I don't know if anybody's even still listening to this at this point. It's 53 minutes in. But I do want to say, even though Brad Greer and I probably see things, well, we do, we just see things in very different ways. I can appreciate his desire to make our neighborhood a nice place to be, right?
Mhm.
Would we go about things the same way? No, but I can very much appreciate how much passion he has for the neighborhood and where he lives and the community. So I do want to say that.
He just want to make Jackson great again. That's all he's doing.
Maja made JA. Wait, it made, well, no, hold on. MG, no, I messed all of that up. It's none of that.
MJGA. Yeah.
It's just a bunch of gibberish.
Magica.
No. All right, say that. That'll just end it. Vijiga. Done.
All right. Y'all next week.
Vijiga.